Hi BookTube, I am here today to do the garden book tag. This tag was originally started by Amy over at From the Dusty Bookshelf. I will link her original video down below. I was tagged to do this about 2 weeks ago and now I finally have the time. Yes, so as part of the occasion, have placed a nice vase of flowers. These are mostly roses, just to, commemorate the occasion. And without further ado, let's get started. The first item is Rambler Rose, a long read with multiple main characters and plot lines. It twists, turns, and puts on a show with language. Now, for this, I chose Two Solitudes by Hugh McLean. This I recently finished as a buddy read with Amy, and this is her favorite book. I recently uploaded a review of this book. I absolutely loved it. This is a iconic piece of Canadian literature. It is a multi-generational story that takes place originally in that at the beginning of the story takes place in the middle of World War I, and follows the clashes between French Canadians and English Canadians, all the way up through right before World War II. McLean's writing style is just absolutely beautiful. He writes with a lot of references to the political and philosophical undertones of the novel. In addition, he also describes a lot of the natural landscape of Quebec, and it is absolutely stunning. Yes, so this is Two Solitudes by Hugh McLean. Ahem. Number 2, Hybrid Tea Rose, modern and long-lasting, a collection of memorable 20th or 21st century poetry or short stories that stay with you for a long time. Now, I don't have this book, but I chose In the Land of Armadillos by Helen Merrill Shankman. I will put the title and the author in the description box. So I read this after the recommendation that Conrad gave over at The Deckled Edge. I think it was 2 months ago. Yes, this is this came out a few months ago, and it's a collection of short stories that is based off of that follows Jewish Poles during World War II, during the Nazi occupation, and how they survived. But it's more than that. It's very innovative and memorable because it combines their stories with Jewish folklore and mythology, and it is absolutely beautiful. I don't know why, but I've read a lot of World War II fiction this year, but this one really stands out in my mind. It was completely beautiful and unexpected, and something really new that I had never really seen before. So I highly recommend In the Land of Armadillos because absolutely stunning, stunning prose, and the stories are just haunting and stay with you for such a long time. Number 3, Lilacs, a seasonally inspired book that you look forward to revisiting each year. So I realize that I don't really read a lot of seasonal books. There are books that I like to reread from time to time, but they're not very seasonal. But for this, I kind of took a little bit of a artistic license, and I chose The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams. Now, this is a book that I have loved since I was a child, and I like to reread it from time to time, often during the Christmas season, even though it's not really holiday themed. Now, I would like to read one short passage, because yes, it was C.S. Lewis who said, "A children's story that is only for children is not much of a story at all." Yeah, and so I like to reread it. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day when they were lying side by side near the nursery fender before Nana came to tidy the room. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" Real isn't how you are made, said the Skin Horse. It's a thing that happens to you when a child loves you for a long, long time. Not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the Rabbit. Sometimes, said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, he said, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once, said the Skin Horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But those things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to the people who don't understand. That's one of my favorite passages from the entire book. Next number is number 4, Bleeding Heart, a beautiful, dark work that broke your heart. For this, I chose a book that I read for the first time this year, and that is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This really did break my heart. This is a classic that I feel like doesn't get read enough. It is so honest, but it definitely is dark as well too. I had been putting this off because I knew that it was going to be difficult to read, but once I started, I couldn't put it down, and I read it within a day. Now, just to give you a picture of what it's like, the opening scene is the main character being raped by her father, and it is so it's so tragic, but it's done so well, and Alice Walker is just a phenomenal author. And even though it's a difficult read, I felt like it was a necessary read. So I chose The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Next question is Queen Anne's Lace, number 5. A work that's sometimes seen as a weed, but you see it for what it is. Great literature. Now, for this, I had a bit of trouble, but I ultimately went with Anthem by Ayn Rand. Now, this is the only Ayn Rand novel that I have read, and it's quite short. Maybe if I read some of her other books, I will change my mind. I know that she is very heavy-handed with her literature. That being said, though, I really did enjoy this. Sometimes, again, it was a bit heavy-handed and kind of like slap you in the face kind of a thing, like, get this metaphor! But I really did enjoy this, and I think this isn't just, I think that this novel isn't just about, can't just be interpreted about objectivism, but can really, sum up, I think, the state of individualism in the 21st century and 20th century that we have. So this is a short little novella. It's only, I think, 100 pages that I read this year. I'm just going to read the blurb. Individualism. He lived in the dark ages of the future, in a loveless world where he dared to love the woman of his choice. In an age that had lost all trace of science and civilization, he had the courage to seek and find knowledge. But these were not the crimes for which he would be hunted. He was marked for death because he had committed the unpardonable sin. He had stood forth from the mindless human herd. He was a man alone. So this is written in a kind of unique style. There is no word such as I, it's only we, and so it's about a man discovering himself as an individual, and basically inventing the word I. I really enjoyed this, no matter quite how I feel about Ayn Rand in particular, although she's a fairly intriguing person and mildly contradictory. But, yeah, so for this, I do view this as literature, even though a lot of people don't like Ayn Rand. Maybe I'll change my mind if I see, once I finish her other works, but yes. Now, for the next question. ForgetMeNot, an early bloomer, a work you read in early life and will never forget. Now, for this, I chose The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Spear. I first read this in the 6th grade, and I completely fell in love with it. I reread this constantly. I really adore this story. It is a small piece of historical fiction. It takes place, So the main character is a girl named Kit Tyler, and after her grandfather dies, she is forced to leave her native home of Barbados and live with her aunt and uncle in New England. And this is early 1700s, and her grandfather was a very wealthy man, and it's about her adjusting to her new life and discovering herself, and it takes place around the Salem witch trials time, and it's about sort of an outsider's perspective on New England, and and about like hard work and colonialism and sort of religious fervor as well. I really adore this. I'm a huge fan of historical fiction, and I fell in love with this when I was 11, and I actually, this is a new copy that I got because my old one fell apart because I had read it too often, but yeah, I absolutely adore this book, and when I read the ForgetMeNot blurb, I immediately thought of The Witch of Blackbird Pond. The next question is Pansies, a classic that is losing popularity. Once upon a time, everyone had them in their garden/library, but now they're being replaced with begonias. Now, for this, I thought I decided to go with Max Havelaar, or The Coffee Auctions of the Dutch Trading Company. Now, I have not finished this. I'm currently reading it, and then I got distracted. This is and it's by Multatuli, which is a pseudonym. This was written in the mid-1800s by a Dutch man who worked for the Dutch Trading Company, and he was so aghast by the atrocities committed against the Malaysians and the Indonesians that he wrote this book to alert Dutch people back home to what was going on. He wrote this entire thing within 6 weeks, which is just astounding, which averages about 14 pages a day. And when it was released, it immediately caused a huge stir in the Netherlands, and has become one of the and it was one of the most well-known pieces of Dutch literature in the 19th century. However, it has kind of dropped off the face of the earth since then, and is virtually unknown outside of the Netherlands, and even in the Netherlands is quite unheard of. I am very interested in colonialism as well as in the Netherlands, so that's how I stumbled upon this book. And so I think, well, I kind of want to reserve my judgment until I finish the end, until I get to the end of it. But it's really sort of a important piece of literature about colonialism. So for Pansies, I picked that. Now the next piece that the next question is Trillium, a native to North America. In some provinces and states, it's illegal to pick these, a banned or challenged book. Now, when I read this question, I immediately thought of The Catcher in the Rye, because that was the first book that came to my mind that's been banned so many times. And then I looked up a list of what books have been banned in the United States, and it turns out basically every single famous piece of literature, if you've heard of it, it's been banned somewhere. But I decided to go in a different direction, and I picked Half of Man is Woman, a novel by Zhang Xianliang. I'm sorry if I'm probably desperately mispronouncing that. So this was written by in the 1980s. This is a novel based off of a true account of the author's life. And if you think your life is difficult, just wait until you hear what happened to him. So so he was a poet, a Chinese poet, and he was seen as being too much of a right-wing sympathizer. So when Mao came to power, he was imprisoned in a labor camp for a poem that he had written. And that was in 1957, and he spent the next 22 years living in a labor camp and going back and forth between jail and labor camps and state farms and so many different things. So this, when he was finally admitted, well, even though Mao hadn't been in power for all of that time, when a new revolution would come, the new government would basically keep imprisoning the old people, old inmates because they, thought of them as troublemakers. So he spent, and he was only 21 when he was thrown into jail. So he spent more of his life in labor camps than he did outside of them. So this is a novel that is about his life, and is about, not his life, but particularly his experience near the end of his time in a labor camp, when he sees a woman who is also in the labor camp and he falls in love with her. And their relationship basically is this metaphor for the state, between the state of China as the woman that he falls in love with, and himself as the intellectual class that China has alienated. And after he marries her, he finds out that he is impotent, and that is supposed to symbolize the way that the intellectual class has been castrated by the government. I recently finished this, and I was kind of unsure how I felt about it, but it was definitely a very worthwhile read. I think, too, I'm so glad I stumbled upon this, because it I think really is really helpful to understand sort of activism in China. And this book particularly, so I've already talked about how the author was basically banned, but this book was banned when it was published in the 1980s in China for being too pornographic, and has since then kind of made a comeback. But yes, so I thought this kind of fit the bill of a banned or challenged work. Now, the last question is Orchid, a work that was as challenging to read and maintain as an orchid. Oh, I'm sorry, second to last. Now, for this, I don't have a copy, but I chose East-West short stories by Salman Rushdie. I had heard a lot about Salman Rushdie, and I thought, what's a nice place to start? And I went with, and I decided to read some of his short stories to see if I liked his magical realism style, and hopefully I would get to the Satanic Verses. I absolutely hated them. I could not even finish it. It was only about, I think, 200 pages, and I got 100 pages in, but his short stories were, I can't. So just to give a perspective of how insane some of them are, one was about a old school teacher who is lamenting about how one of his former students has fallen in love with a woman who is a widow of a thief, and she's older than him, and she already has, I think, 5 children and has lost 2 others. So she asks, and he's in love with her, and she says, "I will only marry you if you get a vasectomy." And so he is lamenting that his former student is no longer a real man. How does he know that he's no longer a real man? Because he sneaks into their yard and stares through their window and observes their relationship. And I couldn't get into it. Maybe it was some metaphor for something that flew over my head, but I can't just listen to a school teacher continually talking about how his student has a vasectomy. Like, I can't do it. Yeah, that fits my Orchid description. I don't know if I'll read more by Salman Rushdie, but no, East-West short stories was not for me and was a big disappointment. I was expecting a lot more. Now, number 10 is Fern, a book that sparked your initial interest in a topic before sporing into a whole TBR of books on that topic. Now, for this, I think this was the 3rd book that I read this year, and it was Revolution from Within, a book of self-esteem by Gloria Steinem. I had been wanting to read something by Gloria Steinem for a while, so I picked Revolution from Within. Oh my gosh. I normally don't read self-help books, but it is so more than that. It's all about how we undermine ourselves based off of, like, sociological, reasons why we're told to doubt ourselves because of our sex or because of our race or something. It is absolutely stunning. I got it from my library, but I really wanted to buy a copy because I wanted to highlight the entire book. It was so good, and I got so much out of it, and it was so inspiring, and yeah, I honestly can't recommend it enough. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars, though, because there were some times where she featured a little bit into the new age aspect, but overall I would give it like 4.5 if I could have given it could have given out half stars on Goodreads. So, so, so good. And she draws from so many other feminist works, like from The Laugh of Medusa to The Feminine Mystique, to Woman in Intimate Geography, which is a book about women's bodies and women's health and women's medicine, a science text, not textbook, but a science nonfiction book. Yeah, I was so happy that I read this. I think I added, though, like 17 books to my TBR just from reading this one. I had checked it out from the library, and it was basically just like sitting around on my night table for like 4 months, and I finally picked it up, and I couldn't put it down. So, so good. Yeah, so I highly recommend Revolution from Within, and yes, so this is all of the questions for this tag. I hope you enjoyed it. The bonus question is, what is your favorite flower? And for that, I would have to say the almond blossom. I really love sort of practical plants, and I hate the flowers that come from, flower farms, and I'm too much of an environmentalist to enjoy them, but I really love of flowers that just, come from nature, and I absolutely love almond blossoms. My mother's family used to grow almonds for a living, and there's nothing more beautiful than, than going to a town where there's just rows upon rows of almond blossoms just sprouting from every single tree. And I have such fond memories of that. So, yes, if you, now there are a few people that I would like to tag, and let me see. Now, first I would like to tag Books and Bread. I would also like to tag RJ from The Secret Stacks and Sophie from Portal in the Pages. I will leave their links down below. If you would like to do this tag, just feel free, and I hope you all enjoy yourselves. I shall see you all next time. Doei!